Well, it's fair to say this was the biggest year for Canadian basketball, and next year will be even more important. The men's team won an astounding bronze medal at the FIBA World Cup over the U.S. and qualified for the 2024 Olympics. That's the first time since the year 2000 when Steve Nash was still lacing up. Meanwhile, the women went to the FIBA America Cup. There, they won a bronze medal as well and qualified for the Olympic pre-qualifying tournament. And there's more. Toronto hosted the first ever WNBA game to a sold-out crowd, and a record was set for the most Canadians ever on NBA rosters. So as we look ahead to the 2024 Olympics, it's safe to say we are at a pivotal moment in Canadian basketball. Michael Bartlett is here to talk to me about the year that was and the year that is to come. He's the CEO of Canada Basketball, and he's with me now. Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Philip. Excited.
As I mentioned, very exciting summer. Where does winning 2 bronze medals in a summer, especially in such exciting fashion, land as far as Canadian sports moments for you?
Well, I think certainly we've been rallying around a commitment as an organization to create the next where were you when moment in Canadian sport. I don't think we're there yet. I do think our teams have delivered some memorable moments for Canadians on home soil that have been watching us around the world. You think about that 12-point comeback against Spain to punch our ticket to the Olympics on the men's side, that thrilling overtime victory against USAB. Every time our women take the court, they've got an exciting matchup and continue to win. So I think we're pacing well towards achieving that ambition. But relatively, aware of the fact that Olympic moments tend to be those ones that people circle and remember for a lifetime. And we're setting ourselves up well this summer and for summers beyond this to have those Olympic moments for the country.
Yeah, it's safe to say the hardcore fan was obviously the big basketball fans were watching this tournament, but the Olympics is when everybody's watching. I think that's probably fair to say on that one.
Yeah.
On the men's side, there was a little bit of adversity when you had head coach Nick Nurse pull out of coaching the team just shortly before the summer process started. Obviously, it worked out great in the end. You got another great coach in the door, but how did the organization handle that in such an important moment for the national team?
Yeah, Philip, first you mentioned about Olympics being what people pay attention to. I do think, versus soccer, I think that is unique to basketball. I think actually the 92 Dream Team is what set that path. The ultimate basketball competition, I think really at the end of the day, is the World Cup. You've got 32 teams competing. It's the best basketball competition, but then you condense that into the Olympics and it's 12 teams. And now each of those 12 teams, I think, will likely have at least one NBA player. Our men's team will have, upwards of 12. Our women's team will have upwards of 6 WNBA players. So the Olympics now is kind of what the basketball fan pays attention to versus the World Cup. It's too bad because the World Cup is like the best basketball competition. Moving forward to your question about that interesting few weeks and months, as we were looking at Nick's own coaching progression in the NBA. Our relationship with Nick was strong, continues to be strong, and it was very collaborative. So as he was endeavoring to transition from the Raptors into a new organization, we were talking regularly. He and Rowan Barrett, our program general manager and EVP, had some backup plans just in case, and had some relationships that we were nurturing just in case. Jordy was one of those. And Nick was very much involved in making sure that Jordy knew of the opportunity, was, somebody who spent some time with Jordy even before he locked in, as we were seeing that, Nick's time could be limited for us this summer. And therefore, the experience of going from when we found out that Nick could no longer coach to when the world found out, it was really tight and we had our plan in action and we were able to mobilize it because a lot of work was being done behind the scenes by Rowan, Nick, and others. And, David Blatt deserves a ton of credit in this respect as well. His knowledge of the global basketball community helped us narrow in on Jordy as somebody who had the global chops, but also the NBA pedigree and relationships that is a magic combination for a men's role like this.
Now you're going to have some more big decisions this summer in terms of who makes the men's squad. How do you balance commitment to the players who have gotten you to this point and putting together the most talented team, even if it includes players who may not have played last year?
Well, if you think back to, we've talked very openly about our core roster strategy, a winter core and a summer core, and how as a program we needed to build teams that we could rely on, teams that we could indoctrinate in systems and style of play so that that familiarity and consistency was there every time we hit the court. So I think great value will be placed on commitment and familiarity with the program already. With that said, there's a whole bunch of factors that are outside of our control as you progress through an NBA season that we'll have to be mindful of. I think what Rowan and Jordy are doing very well through the season is being in touch with our core guys, our leadership group, and taking a pulse of like what they want from the team next summer as well. The great thing about having a team is that the team can also have a voice when you have the team. So certainly the preference is and the commitment is to the guys that have made the commitment to us, but the guys also have a voice, to a degree on what they'd like to see from the summer roster, and we'll be relying on those voices as well to help guide us.
One of the interesting things ahead of the FIBA World Cup was you had the men's team play a lot of games against some top opponents before the tournament, which seemed to really help them, handle some adversity, help them kind of get that cohesiveness. Will there be a similar kind of run-up, do you think, before the Olympics?
Yeah, 100%. Philip, you'll see that on the men's and women's side. That is a big investment that our program and our organization has made over the last 2 years. The women in prep for their World Cup had some time down in Australia, had some great prep games in Canada as well, played a game or 2 games in New York heading into that tournament, and their 4th place finish in the World Cup was a testament to better prep. And that takes a lot of money, it takes time, it takes energy, but that's what high-level professional athletes need to be prepared. There's a preseason for a reason, and we need to manufacture a preseason for our teams before they go into these tournaments. So our men, certainly heading into that overtime game against the United States, they won an overtime in prep games against Spain and Germany. I might have been the calmest guy in the building because I'm like, we know how to win in overtime. Our team was calm because they know how to win in overtime. So that prep is essential. You can definitely count on Canada Basketball for our men's and women's and all willing our 3x3 program as well, having a significant amount of prep games against top quality competition. We've been invited everywhere already. Any of the qualified teams has certainly showed an interest in having us come. The one handcuff to a degree of a European-based Olympics is that most of that prep, if not all, is going to take place on European soil, just because the European teams that have already qualified that we can be negotiating with, they're not coming to Canada before they go back to France. So we're working out some magic. We've got some exciting announcements for early in the new year. We're hoping for some North American-based activities. We'll certainly have some training camp activities across the country that will give our fans an opportunity to be with our teams before they depart. I don't know that we'll get any prep games in Canada just based on the way that, the European hosts are handling things. But with that said, there'll be lots of opportunity to cheer on your team and get us ready to jump overseas and win some medals.
You mentioned playing on home soil. That seems like it's been a bit more of a focus over the past couple years. Has that been a very deliberate effort on Canada Basketball's part?
Yeah, in fact, when I was even interviewing for the job, that was in the job brief. They wanted the board wanted the organization to lean into more home soil events, more broadcast events, because as we look to invest in things like more coaching, better training facilities and timelines for players, the way that the teams travel, and also the prep games, that's going to take some money. Well, I've been in sports and entertainment for, 10 years before I landed at Canada Basketball, and, sports and entertainment monetizes itself based on events. And events on your home soil, events that you can control, events that you can commercialize is the way to do it. So when you look at some of the other thriving NSOs in this country, they've done so on the backs of an event calendar that allows them to bring in corporate partners and bring in fans and monetize that. It's not all, you cannot survive, you cannot thrive in Canadian sport and international sport if you're government funded alone. So you have to go make your own magic, and commercializing events on home soil is the way to do it. So in some respects, we are mandated by FIBA to host a series of qualifiers leading into a World Cup or an AmeriCup. We've got another one coming up in February for an AmeriCup qualifier that we'll host in St. Catharines, but then also creating our own events like Global Jam and open practices and community initiatives. All of that on home soil there's a triple bottom line. One, for our players, it gives them a chance to play in front of fans that are their friends and family. They're nothing better than that. We owe them that. Two, for our fans, it gives them a chance to interact with our teams and get hyped about something that we're creating. And then the third thing is the real bottom line is, financially, it creates new assets for us to sell. And those are all great things.
You mentioned big events on home soil. This one, it's more of wasn't a Canada basketball event, but was a Canadian basketball event, which was the WNBA playing a game here in Toronto. Tell me a bit about what that event was like and what that can do for the growth of the game here.
Well, I think very grateful that NBA Canada was able to work with the WNBA and bring that here. Leah McNabb, who is the managing director of NBA Canada and a good friend of the organization on our board, really leaning into ways that organization can help create momentum and participation growth, and specifically in this case in girls basketball in this country. So grateful that the NBA has that vision, WNBA has that vision, and NBA Canada and the Raptors are helping bring that to light. Ultimately, I know that see it, be it is a big part of, interest in sport. The more opportunities we can have for young girls to be connected to their heroes in the game and see, strong women as role models playing the game of basketball, it's good for the country. It's good for the social fabric of the country. What I will say is I got challenged a little while back, by somebody, do I think the WNBA presence in Canada as a franchise is essential to the future success of the game in this country, the women's game in this country? And I was quick to point out, we have a WNBA franchise. They just all have Canada across their chest when they play. Like, we've got a roster full of WNBA, European pros, NCAA future WNBAers that are representing Canada. So don't sleep on the fact that there's already a team, a high-quality team, ranked 5th in the world team that is representing Canada, filled with WNBA talent.
Despite that, I think it was disappointing for a lot of fans when they found out that the WNBA would not be expanding to Toronto, at least not in the near future. What was that like for you to hear? Was that a disappointment on your end as well, or was it something you kind of knew was coming?
I would hesitate to call it a disappointment, because I think I understand the long game that's being played. I think it's not a no, it's a not now. And ultimately, when I look at it within the lens that I have, which is a unique lens, our women's program is not nearly as successful as it is without MLSE and the Toronto Raptors and its, almost 3 decades plus of support. When we put the Raptors claw ball on our women's jersey, or in our women's shorts, it was a thank you to the Raptors for everything that they've done to propel this program. The future of Canada basketball and women's Canada basketball is strong because of what MLSE and the Raptors have done. So I do not believe that the future of women's basketball in this country hinges entirely on whether there's a WNBA franchise or not. I think there are other things that we need to do, like support the national team, support the age group teams, and quite frankly, find a way to create more domestic pro opportunities for these women. I've got 3/4 of my roster, play all year in North America, or all summer in North America, and then all winter in Europe, because they're stitching paychecks together to play the game that they love. It's a shame that they have to go so far to be well paid and can't do that in their own backyard. So that's something, it isn't the national team or national sporting organization's mandate to create that, but we have to be catalysts for more conversations and for other partners to come forward and create that opportunity for them.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even just the idea that they are expanding, that creates more roster spots and more opportunity for Canadian players.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, Aaliyah Edwards is coming to town or coming to Toronto to play TMU with her Yukon team. She's a WNBA draft pick in the making. And, last count I saw, I think well over 100 Canadian females playing D1 NCAA basketball. All 100 of those will have pro basketball opportunity down the pathway, whether it's WNBA or European pro. I'd love there to be more domestic pro opportunity for them outside of the WNBA, but that's something that'll happen over time.
Tell me about the growth of the 3-on-3 game, because I think it's something the average Canadian fan probably doesn't pay as much attention to, but it does seem like something that's really grown over recent years.
Yeah, I think, credit to FIBA and the IOC for seeing the success of beach volleyball as an Olympic sport. And that is now one of the more popular Olympic sports. So creating 3x3 as a vertical that is an Olympic sport, I think Canada will be introduced to it, at this Olympics for the most part. We've got one of the best, if not, I would argue the best 3-on-3 women's program in the world. Our team has 2 years in a row won the World Series Women's Series title. They are not ranked number one in the world because of some, FIBA, the way that FIBA points are calculated, volume of games, so on and so forth. But they've got a great shot to qualify with 2 opportunities in May, 2 tournaments that they're in. The Plouffe sisters, Paige and Casey, Crozon and Casey Bosch, I think they'll make Canada proud this summer. The onus now on us is recognizing that sometimes Olympic moments are the catalyst for the growth of the game. How do we as an organization with our provincial partners, with clubs across the country, use the Olympic spotlight on 3x3 to mobilize more 3x3 gameplay in a structured way? Because right now, I would argue we don't have a very deep pipeline of 3x3 minded athletes. Everybody, this is my biggest concern for the popularity of the game. As the game gets more popular, more and more clubs are popping up, more and more structure to the game in a 5-on-5 environment is being put on youth. I grew up playing 3x3 basketball. It was the most pure game of basketball on a driveway. And good news about our sport is that is now an Olympic sport and a vertical for people. So how do we capitalize on that Olympic spotlight to keep that vertical of the sport popular and growing well into the future? And then by LA 2028, we've got, hundreds of athletes to pick from. That's the end goal.
What does that look like then? Because, like you said, people don't grow up playing 3-on-3 basketball. Is that getting 3-on-3 basketball in schools? Is that really going to the grassroots?
Yeah, I think if we were to chart our best case, at a certain age point, 3x3 might be the only version of basketball you can play. Maybe that's the entry-level version of basketball. And then you're also, introduced to the fact that you can stay in it as a vertical specialty, or you can double dip and play 5-on-5 and 3-on-3. I think into the school systems, into this Canadian college and youth sports system would be important as well. The great thing about, and I've been pushing for this for a bit, the great thing about 3x3 basketball is that it's first to 21 or 10-minute game. There is no reason that every Canadian college and university in this country couldn't have its reserve players playing a 3x3 basketball game at halftime of every varsity 5-on-5 game. If nothing else, it'll just create more energy and attention for the game, which will create a bit of see it, be it, and we'll have more athletes thinking about playing that vertical of the game.
Something I've heard you talk about both in this interview a lot and as well in other interviews in the past is investment. Tell me about we've talked about where that investment comes from. Tell me about where you're putting that financial investment.
Yeah, we've benefited from being able to grow gross revenues fairly significantly over the last 2.5 years, 3 years. And every new dollar that we've brought in, we've put into high performance basketball, everything from, creating an under 23 team, which, now competes in an event that we own called Global Jam, leveling up the resourcing of our women's programs so that they're coached by a full-time pro head coach. Their training camps are longer. There's, more prep games, the way that they travel and stay, all the way through to our age groups and how we're investing in, a girls' academy now to match a boys' academy at 13 and 14 years old, so that we're connecting that, the entry point of the high performance funnel to the absolute, pinnacle of it at the senior team. So we're putting a lot of all that money back into basketball to control the outcomes that we can most effectively control, and that's performance. When I look at this past summer, including our 3x3 verticals, we had across our men's and women's 5-on-5 teams and our 3x3 teams, men's and women's, we had 8 gold medals, 7 silver medals, 8 bronze medals. That's a historic summer for this program. In our last 10 5-on-5 competitions, we've been in the semifinals 9 times, which means we competed for a medal 9 out of 10 times in 5-on-5 FIBA competition. That's huge. That is now the watermark for us. So the investments are working. I do call them investments, as I do in my board meetings, because ultimately we are spending more than we're earning right now. But we're doing it with the performance in mind so that we can catch fire in a way that will garner the country's attention around basketball, because we believe that passionately about our opportunity to unify this country by winning, but also by being a really good human-focused organization.
Obviously, the biggest basketball juggernaut is not too far from us, just across the border. How much do you look at what they do there with their program and how that can be applied here in Canada?
Yeah, I think certainly USAB is a great model in a lot of respects. I think there are even more parallels to some of the European nations like Spain, France, and the way that they've focused on investing in age group in order to churn sustained success. The ultimate thing is the U.S. has such an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent, volume of people driving talent. And we don't have that same volume of people. So now it's about how we develop that talent that we do have. And that's very much, I think, where we lean in a bit more to the European way of the academies that drive age group, which drives senior team, and how they all connect into one big picture, rather than, pick the best 12 boys and girls that show up to a training camp, because you've got 100 that show up that could all make the team. So it's about purposeful development of those athletes. A lot of credit goes to Denise Dignard and Rowan Barrett. They've been leading the men's and women's programs for, Denise over 2 decades, Rowan almost 2 decades. So the talent that we're seeing play out at the senior team level is because they made smart development decisions 20 years ago about how that talent would be nurtured. And that's very much a European way. With that said, I think we learn a lot of the spectacle of basketball from USAB, and we're trying to borrow some of that north of the border with the way that we host events.
One of those events was a Global Jam. I've been to the event the past couple of years, a lot of fun. Tell me a bit about where the idea for that came from.
Well, that, certainly from a strategic plan and board perspective, we saw the need to own a signature event in our backyard and partner with a broadcaster, in this case, Sportsnet, to create a made-for-television basketball tournament. And then we were able to lean into, who we are as an organization, believing in equity and diversity, and a men's tournament that runs parallel to a women's tournament with the experience. This was also coming off of some of that NCAA controversy of, their women's March Madness being a far different experience for that of their men. So we paralleled the experiences in the way that they train, the primetime opportunities, the hotels that they stay in, same hotel. So this became a way for us to live our values, to also create a development opportunity for an age group that was kind of being missed. You age out at FIBA at U19 and then you jump right into senior. Well, our senior team are made up of 23, 24, 25-year-olds. So it's 4 or 5 years before you crack that senior team roster sometimes. an under 23 tournament creates an opportunity to connect to Canada and Canada basketball as you're waiting to crack that senior team roster. So it's a development opportunity, it's a fan engagement opportunity, it's a values opportunity, and ultimately it became a commercial opportunity for us as well and with Sportsnet becomes a storytelling and content opportunity. So a lot of wins there. We built that plane as we were flying it. We kind of pulled it together from idea to event in its first year in 6 months. We're continually refining it, and we'll bring it back better than ever each and every year.
One of the really neat things, I think, from a fan perspective was the opportunity to see some of these young players who, some have gone on, to play professionally. You're really getting to see like some of the top young talent right in your own backyard.
Yeah, I think, we've coined a bit of a phrase. I'd love the NBA and WNBA draft to be filled with as seen first on Global Jam, ... And listen, I think the hoop heads like yourself and others know a lot about these athletes before they're seen at Global Jam. But an athlete like Leonard Miller or Omax Prosper or, soon next year, Aaliyah Edwards, for a lot of Canadians, we do recognize that the first time that they will consume their talent on broadcast or in live, and in person, might be through Global Jam. So, it is not a bad thing. And honestly, I think the international talent that's coming through, the U.S. talent that's coming through on these teams, Devontae George is having a great season for Utah, as seen first on Global Jam. He played his first NCAA games as an incoming freshman as a Global Jam athlete when Baylor came to town in year one. So those are cool things for us to be a part of. And as these athletes mature through their own development, Global Jam can be kind of their spotlight moment for Canada.
Okay, now we're getting close to the end here, so I'm going to ask a big question. As we look forward, to you, what does success look like for Canada basketball? What is like the goals you're trying to meet?
Well, there's a few layers to that onion for sure. From a performance perspective, we know what we strive for: Olympic medals, podium appearances, competing for a medal each and every competition. I think Paris sets up really nicely for us to be a 2-week story for Canada. Men's, women's, 3x3. I think we've got a shot to do well in each vertical. And, I'm really proud of the progress that the organization has made towards that ambition. And I think this will be a summer where we can capture the nation's attention and hold it for quite some time. And then, I look at commercially, we've got to become more financially sustainable so that we can continue to invest in our evolution. But not only that, we're not just investing in who we are from a performance perspective. We aim to be an NSO that is best in the world, but also best for Canada. We want basketball to be the best sport for Canada, the sport that young people grow up aspiring to be a part of, even if it's only on their driveway. And how do you do that? Well, you lead with values. You create a safe, connected system. Safe sport is finally a dinner table conversation in this country. I want to make sure that we lead on those issues, not react to those issues. And then, uniquely as well, basketball represents the mosaic of Canada, the diversity of this country, on who plays it, who watches it. We still have to do a better job of creating more diversity within coaching and officiating ranks in this country. So success is multi-layered. There isn't just one KPI. It's not just gold medal or bust, and that's how we're going to measure our ability to be successful. But this is also a long game too. So I get really excited. Paris is one thing, but man, LA 2028 on the court of the United States, or courts of the United States, and the chance that we have to make some history, again, while being a values-based organization and rallying the country. We get to play the long game, unlike the Raptors and the NBA or the WNBA teams. There's no free agency period. There's no trade deadline. We are Canada for life, so we get a chance to play that way.
Just to take a step back, you've been in the role for a couple years now. How fun is it to be a part of the organization at such a very exciting time. Obviously, there's a lot of work to go along with it, but there's a lot of fun moments too, I imagine.
Yeah, listen, this is the toughest assignment I've had in my life, but the best one, the most fun I've ever had in sport, and I've had a lot of fun in sport and in community jobs that I've had before. So we're down by 12 in the fourth quarter against Spain with the Olympic qualification on the line. I won't call it fun, but boy, was it memorable, on the other side of it. So there are moments where I've never been more anxious. I've never been more nervous, but I've also never been more proud and never been more happy about some of the magic that we're creating. So I am absolutely lucky to have and fortunate to have this opportunity. I don't want to waste it. I don't want, to close my eyes for too much of it, and make sure that we're doing our level best to live the values of the country, to make the country proud, and to truly, like, I can count on two hands the where were you when moments in sport in my lifetime. I want to add, the 11th finger to that, and I want it to be a Canada basketball moment. I want that to be the reason that in 5 years at some dinner table, somebody says, do you remember when ... and it's a Canada basketball moment.
Awesome. Well, Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and lots of exciting things ahead, hopefully.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you, Philip, for being a fan, being an ambassador for the work that we're doing, and for certainly cheering us on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.